Okay, starting question, just trick to get warmed up. What's the fastest land animal?
Fastest land animal, gazelle.
The cheetah.
Oh, cheetah. That's what I meant.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
cheetah.
Where's the best place to park at LAX?
Uh, Lot C.
Okay, I think I would go with the same thing. So, what's happening for those of you who recognize me and recognize the room that I'm sitting in, you will probably also recognize the room that Elena is in as well. So, this is not a trick. We are both in the same house. This just sort of happened to go down this way, which to me is pretty funny. But uh, but yeah, so the reason why this call is taking place is that Elaine and I were having a conversation a few weeks ago, and it was one of those conversations where I thought, man, it would be so good if other people could listen to this because it was basically just two people that have a little bit of similarities in their backgrounds. Hang on, let me let someone in here. Uh, hey, Mai, glad you're here. I've got another participant here. So the conversation was like, wow, I wish that other people could listen into this because it's basically about two people, creative people that had some similarities in their background. And obviously, Elena and I teach together. We've known each other for a long time, but it was like, oh, I wish other people could listen in because the conversation's kind of erratic and it's funny, but there's also like poignant things happening. And so I thought, hey, why don't we just try this and have a conversation? So it's not like an interview. It's just basically us talking as we would a few minutes ago sitting in the living room. Does that sound right?
Sounds right.
Admitting a few more people here.
Cool.
All right. So the thing that got this conversation going was you just did an assignment in Japan. And normally, over the past couple of years, when you and I are talking about Japan, we're always talking about workshops. So it's logistics and students and housing and sort of assignments and what we're going to do with students. And all of a sudden, I was like, wait a minute, you did an assignment. Now, I haven't done an assignment like anything like that for 15 years. So I've done projects for other people outside of Blurb in the last 15 years, but they were bizarre, kind of year long assignments that I wouldn't classify as anything like what you did. So I was fascinated by what was this? Like what were you doing? And give me sort of a typical, just tell us a little bit about what that assignment was.
Okay, yeah. It was actually a great assignment. So I was invited by the head of a region, like they call it a prefecture, which is in the north of Tokyo and northern Fukushima. So they asked me to come to help them highlight the artisans that are working in the region and also really what it looks like. Because Japan, as everybody probably knows, people are going in droves. So the the regions that are not the major cities are really looking to help bring awareness to the areas that are quieter. And so they asked me, would you come in? And we have a number of people here. We'd love you to photograph. In fact, it actually came from me telling them this was a good thing to do. And then they said, yes, you're right. Would you come do it for us? So I had gone earlier this year to this same region, and I'll say the government, the sort of regional government of this region said, we really need to get people up here. So how do you think we can do that? And I said a great way to do it would be to photograph and interview the people who live and work here and let the world know what's going on. So that's what I did. So it was 5 days of shooting. And it was 3 to 4 separate locations every day, which was pretty challenging over the course of 5 days. So they had arranged everything. So I flew into Tokyo, took the train to this northern region, which is like 3 hours away, and then started immediately. So that meant I actually had to list who I photographed. It was a both again, it's kind of landscape and portraiture with interviews that I conducted with the help of a translator. So that was, it's an incredibly beautiful region. It's ecologically really significant and really beautiful. So a lot of it was shooting landscape and then also a mother and son who hand make tatami mats in their factory. So that was quite beautiful. And I'll go into how I did it after. I just want to do a quick run through of who I shot. A portrait of the head of a important ecology center. Um, they also have this well-known kind of river gorge and the guys who run the boats and also sing. I did a portrait of him on the boat. A monk at a really famous, incredibly beautiful temple. Um, I did portraits and environmental shots of this historic home that had been renovated by this kind of hip Tokyo couple that had moved back up there. A lot of food. I did an environmental portrait of 10 traditional dancers. So, and more. And more. A sake, a young woman who took over her father's sake brewery and is now
So,
the face of
and
it.
are you working alone or with an assistant?
I'm working with an assistant. So I was there with an assistant and with three people from the prefecture who were also with me. So we're sort of a group of five always.
So you're shooting, you got an assistant helping. I take it you're shooting digitally.
Yep.
Do you think would they have allowed if you said I want to shoot film, would they have said no way?
There wasn't the budget for film, so I had to take their budget into account. Yeah,
Okay.
budget was significant.
So you're shooting the assistants holding the light, helping with other things and probably translating as well. And then you have three people from the prefecture who are behind you.
Yes.
So you basically have a crowd.
Yeah, I have a crowd.
And
Yeah.
did that how did was that helpful to the people in the photographs, or you think that that was kind of like, oh shit, this is, there's a whole team here?
I mean, after the first afternoon, I said it would really be helpful if you could all go away. Like, please just let me be with because it's really important when you're shooting portraits to connect. Also, there's a language barrier. I don't speak Japanese, so I have to relax the people who aren't necessarily used to being photographed and also light them. And, it's like a magazine assignment. So I would walk into the scene, let's say it's the monk, for example. So I know I'm going to photograph this monk. And I actually brought him up because I'll tell you in a moment. But where am I going to photograph him? What's the best place going to be? How am I going to represent him and this incredible temple that he lives at and belongs to and is kind of so it's an environmental portrait. They're all environmental portraits. And I didn't want the whole crowd with me, only the assistant, because people who aren't used to being photographed don't want a lot of eyes on them. It's very uncomfortable. So I made them go. And they were fine with that. Toward the end, they didn't even ask me. They just didn't come in.
And give me approximate timeline for walking into a scene to the time you walked out.
Because I was on a pretty tight schedule, I would say it was an hour and then maybe a little more because of the interview. So shooting time would be an hour. One thing I also want to mention is the lighting. So I was relying on the lighting that the assistant had. That's sort of the agreement we had. I didn't know that lighting system. That wasn't a system I'd worked with before. It's a Godox, which a lot of you who are on the call might work with it. It was the first time I'd worked with that lighting system. So in LA, I had to rent that system and practice with it, which I think is pretty important to have to do. So I couldn't land with this level of pressure without knowing that system. So I practiced on that system before I got there. And that was really helpful.
You used a word that I'm very curious about, which is pressure. There's two questions I have, and they're both trick questions. Number
Okay.
one, is this kind of assignment, would you ever put the word fun attached to it? And two, how many years have you been working as a photographer?
Oh, 30?
30? Do you still get nervous?
Totally. Yes. That's an
That's the answer
absolute.
I wanted.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think getting nervous is a great motivator to making a good picture, and also having people around me kind of watching is also a great motivator. It's kind of sickening in the beginning. And then once you get your stride, I'm in a totally new place and with new people. And I'm, again, having to photograph people who aren't used to being photographed in a new environment. So, but I've been a magazine photographer for a long time, and that was always the assignment. You go in, you connect, you come out with a picture, like you have to. And I felt the same way here. It was exactly the same way.
So this is probably trivial, but it's interesting to me, which is you're at a prefecture where from what you said, the Japanese government's trying to figure out a way to bring people to this prefecture, which may not be on the top 10 list of places to visit in Japan, but
Right.
they're trying to say that, which tells me that probably there's a lack of infrastructure for a lot of people coming to the region because they never have. So where like what time of day would you end shoots and where did you end up staying? Were you at hot spring hotels or where at people's houses? Like what happened?
Yeah, all of the above. So I was at, yeah, that's a really good question. So Japan, we're going to be going to Japan again next spring. We're doing another workshop there, and we may or may not be able to go to this region at some point. I'd like to take a group of photographers because it's pretty interesting. Yeah, the infrastructure is a little bit smaller there. It's not like what you would find in, of course, Tokyo or Kyoto or Osaka. Um, I stayed in people's homes. They call homestays, which are pretty interesting. They've renovated part of their house and they're there. So they're separate, but they're there, which was pretty fun. Stayed in a traditional ryokan, which is an old, not old, but it's a traditional place where there are hot springs and onsen, so you have baths and then you sleep on the floor. This is the first time in a long time I'd slept on a tatami mat on the floor, which was great. Um, One of the assignments was a beautiful old farmhouse that had been renovated by this young couple, and they turned it into really a spectacular location. So I've also photographed kind of, I did some architectural photographs while I was there, the whole scene of the place, because they had done such an incredible interiors, architecture. And when I photograph them, they're also a good example. They're a good, so I stayed there. I got to their place. I photographed everything they had created. Um, it was a couple, a husband and wife. The husband was an amazing chef, so he made the 17-course dinner that we had. Really 17 courses. And she was there to help and do all kinds of other things. So the next day, my task was to photograph them. So photographing couples is hard. Two people, groups are hard and photographing couples are hard. So one solution, he was really challenging. He closed his eyes a lot. He blinked a lot. He was like a heavy blinker for any of you who have do a lot of portrait photography. And so my solution to photographing him was I had one of the people with me sort of engage him in questions across the table. So I was able to stand across from him, and while he was kind of thinking, not while he was talking, but while he was thinking, kind of in between words, in between sentences, I would photograph him. And then he wasn't standing stiff. He was animated, and those pictures came out great. And then I was also able to do interesting portraits of the two of them. So a solution to him being challenging to shoot was again having someone engage with him so he would talk. I'm sort of emulating what he would do. He was talking about his food, his cooking, about the place he had made, and then there were some great pictures that came from him. I'll talk about another super challenging portrait was the monk. He really didn't want to be photographed.
Monks are always shifty and
Me.
can't trust them. They're always hard because they're always working an angle to get you to convert. That's
Exactly. Yeah, he was definitely challenging. So he gave me like 10 minutes max. And he was really uncomfortable with being photographed. And there were a lot of people walking by, and he wanted to dictate where the picture was taken, and tons of tourists were there walking up and behind him. So I'm trying to get him a beautiful portrait of him and the location of where we were. So something that signified we were on the temple grounds, which was the temple in the distance. So a sort of shallow depth of field on him, and then the temple in the background. So people were walking by. I kept having to wait. He was growing more and more impatient. The Japanese government people who were with me were very highly sensitive to his discomfort, putting a lot of pressure on me. So in the end, you need one to work, and one worked. So that is all I needed. And I was really worried that I didn't get it. And then, of course, I think a question was asked, which we'll get to the questions after. Did I look at my work as I was going through? Of course, I'm checking. I was never tethered. if I'm doing an editorial assignment, I'm tethered. I can see exactly what I'm shooting. I can see the lighting. Everything gets changed. This was much more on the fly, but had to be exactly the same level as if I was doing something for a major magazine or publication or advertising firm or whatever.
I have one last question about this, which is what was the intention? Where is this work destined? How are they going to use it?
They're going to use it in a lot of ways. So in an exhibition, several exhibitions actually, they're going to try to get it published because I also thought it was really interesting to do interviews with the people who I'm photographing. Who are they? What's their craft? I mean, they were all incredible artists or again, chefs or monks or, people who have been working for a lot of years and are really excellent at what they do. So I wanted to hear who they were and also hear how the particular region, like the Miyagi region, was part of their work. If you go there, who can you see? What can we visit? So, did I answer the question? I meandered.
I don't know. I wasn't listening. Um, but I think,
That I know.
I think there's probably people here that were, and they could probably answer that. Yeah, no, I'm very surprised. And I would have never guessed an exhibition. I would have
Yeah.
guessed either in,
Oh yeah, marketing
basically,
materials,
yeah,
magazine.
PR materials for the prefecture or Japan in
Totally.
general, or getting it published. Absolutely. But an exhibition actually that's takes it up a level in terms of, I mean, it sounds like a pretty fantastic assignment. It seems like an assignment that probably every single person on this call would love to do. That's why I think it's so interesting. And I haven't really talked to anybody about the specifics of an assignment for quite some time, which is what I was sort of getting after. But that's interesting. Having an exhibition of the work and also being able to go see a part of Japan that not a lot of people go to that sounds pretty intriguing as well.
Yeah, it was really eye-opening. I've been to Japan many times now, and I had not really, I've been to remote regions like Hokkaido, where we'll also go, but I hadn't really been up there as much. And there's a ton to explore. And just the people who are, um, you know, working and the crafts that they're making, they're creating, they're spectacular. They're really doing some interesting things. And one last thing I'll say about it, they're really trying to transform these areas that have been kind of emptied out. So a lot of places, like in the States too, nobody wants to live in rural areas anymore. They're all gravitating toward the major cities, but the major cities are kind of untenable expense-wise, and the government is really doing a lot to like bring people back up and incentivize them. That we were in incredible rice fields, beautiful rice paddies, rice fields. It's a rice growing region. So yeah, it was a great assignment. I think there'll be another one in a different prefecture. And it was a great challenge to just be dropped into this other territory that I wasn't so familiar with and be asked to do this. And the other thing I really liked about it was, the thing about doing assignments is connecting. How do you connect? Everybody is always looking to connect with their subject. So it's always about connection. Whether even if you can't speak the language, it's about connection. Like what is it that you as the photographer can do to create and establish that connection, gain trust, and then make the picture you really want to make. This is critical. So and not be sort of pressured or intimidated by other eyes watching. Like, for example, the government people who were with me, you have to learn to tune them out, either have them it's you're in control of the picture, so you have to say what it needs to be, and that requires some experience and some effort to say, like, I need it to go in this direction. I'm not there yet. I don't feel that I have it. You have to feel that you have the picture, and if you don't or see, you have to make sure that you can get it before you walk off site, or you've failed. So that's a lot of pressure, but that's just something that is exciting, and the adrenaline is always going. And that's what I really love about doing these kinds of assignments. But it really translates to absolutely everybody working, is how do you connect? So Dan, when you were doing a lot of your stories and assignments, like what ways did you find that you connected with people in order to get your projects done the way you wanted them to be done?
Oh, I'm cut from the Avedon mold. But I'm shifty. I'll do whatever it takes to get connection. I will. I think that's one of the best things about being a photographer is you can be a chameleon. So if you're working on the border and you're around border patrol guys and they're a bunch of alpha males who are kind of macho but not well-rounded, you can morph yourself into being an alpha male who talks about guns and hunting and fishing and all that, which in my case is true because I grew up doing that. And then in other situations, I'm in LA working on an assignment for a woman who's a chef for A-list celebrities in Hollywood. And then you have to morph into another version of who you are. So, and also it's always working an angle to get what I want. And not in a nefarious way. I was kind of joking about that, but Avedon was famous for breaking people down. Like he
Yeah.
would break them on set, and when he broke them, then he would get the legendary
Yeah.
photographs made.
Yeah.
I don't do that, but I'm going to work every angle I can to make sure I'm going to get what I need from that scene or that place. And I don't get a chance to do that much anymore, but it's a really fun thing. And once you learn how to do that, it comes back so quickly that you can
Yeah.
just immediately come back to do that. So, but I also kind of give myself on those rare chances when I get into the field where I'm doing nothing but photographing, I'm always kind of, I guess and I've mentioned this before sometimes on my channel, is that I call it photo fitness, where like I shot a protest a couple weeks ago and it was in the middle of a blizzard. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. Probably never going to get this opportunity again. So once I kind of covered the basis of what I thought I wanted from that, then I just started going and like testing myself. I would see people who I thought, oh, that guy's going to be pissed if I take a picture. And I would just go talk to him. And I'd be like, hey, I'm shooting portraits. Can I make pictures of you? And not one person said no. And I also said, like, hey, can I make this picture of you? But I'm also going to get this far away from you. I'm going to get right on top of you. And again, am I going to use those pictures? No, but it's keeping myself in shape for when I need to make a picture like that. My skills are up. And
Totally. Wait a minute. You asked, can I'm
yeah,
going to do this and I'm going to get really close to your face. So you put it out there first without
yeah.
just doing it. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
really
so I mean, I basically scouted my location first. So if I saw somebody that I thought would be a real challenge, I would look at them and I'd think, okay, that guy's probably going to say no. But if he says yes, then I need to have the location set so that I can do this in a matter of seconds.
right.
And then I would ask, and no one said no, because I think it was how I physically approached them and how I verbalized what it is that I was after. And then once they agreed to it, I would move them a very short distance to where I wanted them, or just move them in the direction like backlit or whatever I wanted.
Right.
And then I would say, oh, by the way, I'm going to get close.
Right.
And just to see what would happen because with a 40 mil on the Nikon, I can get inches away from you. And not only did no one say no, but a few weeks after that, I ran into one of the people I had photographed there at the Burro races. And he looked at me and I kind of looked at him and I was like, he looks familiar. And he was saying the same thing to me. And I said, oh, I made your picture at the Burro races, or I made your picture at the protest. And he was like, yeah, you got really close. And I said,
Right.
yeah, and so I, sent the photo from my phone to his phone or whatever, and it was all good. But that's, to me, I don't have the assignment that you had at the end of this, but hypothetically, at some point in my life down the road, I might. So I kind of feel like keeping sharp is an important skill.
Yeah, you have to practice. You have to take your gear out and review it. Like even with the lighting, I thought, oh, I can do this, no problem. I've lit for years. I had to really figure that system out. And like it took me a little while to rework my brain to get kind of back into it. But I wanted to go back to one thing you said, which is people said yes. But what happens when people say no and aggressively say no? Because everybody encounters that, especially if they're shooting on the street. How do you how do you deal with somebody who says no, get away from me, or even aggressively says no?
You want to know what I really do?
I know this is going to go in the wrong direction. Yeah, go ahead.
When someone says no, especially aggressively no, internally, I'm just cursing them. I'm
Yeah.
like, you a-hole. I
Yeah.
cannot believe you're saying no and you're being mean about it. But I
Yeah.
totally get why they are. So I take all that angst and I just swallow it and keep it inside. But the other thing too is no doesn't necessarily mean no, depending on who it is. So a lot of times people nowadays will immediately say no because they don't exactly know what you're doing, which is
Yeah.
one of the reasons why I try to keep like a little printed field guide with me. So because someone will say no, 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 no. But if I linger in that area and I
Right.
shoot other photos, what often happens is they come back and they go, what are you doing? Tell me again what it is you're doing. And then I know I have them because then I can articulate pretty well what I'm after and what I'm doing. And also a little printed, whether it's a little business card or what anything kind of separates you from someone who's a fly by night or a social media person. So I'll say, well, I'm kind of doing this thing and I'll have, I'll have a little book of something if I have time to do that. At a protest, typically no. If someone says no, I just go. Like the little anarchy kids running around the protest who were there to get attention, but then they act like they don't want to be photographed. I could care less. I'm not going to give those guys any time. But if it's somebody that I really want and I can tell that there was a hesitancy in why they were saying no, I can oftentimes win them over. If it's a, cop or border patrol person and they're being an a-hole, I just say, whatever, man. There'll be somebody else. There's other people I can photograph.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's important to kind of keep your confidence and to just keep circling the area and finding the people who are okay with it and just, continuing to go back in for sure. So I also wanted to ask you, because this is something we talk about, not infrequently, is kind of how you balance your full-time job with a creative, keeping your life creative.
Oh, am I balancing? Did, did someone balance my life? No, it's not really in balance. In my head,
Right.
in my head, I see a future where it is, but I've also been seeing that for 15 years. So, Blurb is pretty, it doesn't seem like it on the surface. Even to me, it doesn't seem like it's all encompassing. But then I look at my schedule for the rest of the today when we're done with this call, and I'm like, wow, there's, hours of phone calls, and then there's two more written pieces I have to do. I have to watch a film and then provide like edits and critiques for films. It pretty much takes up all my time. So I think, I've relatively come to peace with it. And my victories now as a photographer, what I'm doing on the side, they're small. So if I can get a little victory here and there, if I can make a picture of a bird or make even just like lay out a spread where I go, oh, this is a decent photo with a decent spread, I feel like, oh, I won. Like everything's in balance. But I think most modern jobs, full-time jobs, especially at a company like Blurb, which is in essence a tech company, I think most of these are all-encompassing jobs. And
Right.
and I'm super fortunate because I'm a little bit off the playing field. I'm technically in the marketing department, but I'm kind of a lone ranger out here doing a bunch of my own stuff. So but yeah, I mean, I have no complaints. I love the job. It's a lot of fun for me to watch other people having success with photography or books or whatever it is. And I do just enough to kind of scratch that itch of whatever. But I do have dreams of having a runway in front of me where someone says, "Oh, you have 6 weeks to go work on this project, and you have nothing else to do except shoot and film and work on this project." I've been trying to figure out a way to get that for years, and I don't see it happening unless some monumental thing shifts. But whatever, no complaints.
No
I just
complaints.
figured out my Nikon Z8 after owning it for a year. I think I just figured out how the menus work. So it's been a positive, even though this morning when I picked it up, I didn't remember what I had learned yesterday. So I'm still a work in progress. But yeah, so one before we jump to the questions,
Yeah.
and I know that there's everyone, if you have a question, just drop it in the chat.
Yes,
Most of you have
please.
already. Um, I just want to, this is a major jump, but I'm very curious. Not only did you go to Japan, but then you mangled yourself by immediately flying back to Albania. And that's a whole nother story. And we actually have an Albanian on this call, by the way, or Albanian descent on the call besides you. But you went to Albania back to Shkodër to a film festival where you were premiering your film about Albania in Albania for the first time, correct?
Correct.
So I have
Yeah.
1,000 questions which we can never get to, but just
Okay.
a quick synopsis of what the hell happened. What was that?
All right, I'll try to be brief about this film. So, it's a project I've been working on for 5 years, and this was the Albanian premiere of a film. So I discovered their film archive. So it's specifically their film archive. Albania was under communist rule and isolated. It was like a North Korea-like country from 1945 to 1991. So almost no one went in or out. I'm of Albanian descent, so it's a place I go back to again and again. Dan and I have been many times together. I discovered the archive. I made it my I became very invested in working with films from the archives. So from start to finish, I took their propaganda films and I edited more than 100 hours of films down to a 1 hour, three-screen triptych. So I that film is done. So it's a 68-minute feature-length film that premiered there. So I was really worried about showing it to the Albanians because I took their footage and I cut it up in an experimental way. And it was a really wonderful festival in the north of Albania, 2 hours north of the main city, Tirana. It's in Shkodër, and it was a great experience. So I go back and forth between film and photography. I think of them as certainly not interchangeable, but certainly related. So it was really fun, really thrilling to see it on an ultra wide screen in the way it should have been seen.
Well, seeing as you're still here, it seems like it probably went over fairly well in Albania.
Yeah,
You were
yes.
not detained in Shkodër,
I
and
was not. Yeah, I
yeah.
was worried about it, but I was not. Yeah.
I mean, there's a million things I could unpack there. A triptych, a movie shown in triptych form, that's interesting. And there's no actors. You're just mining the archive from the
Finding
propaganda
the
film.
archive to tell a story.
100 hours. How did you know all the questions about scanning? What kind of material was this made on? How did you scan it? Who was doing the editing? All that stuff. We don't really have time for that. Maybe at the end, if we get through some of these questions, we'll come back. But let me
Great.
take a look at the chat here. And come on, chat. Come on. I'm going to go back up to the top, and then I'm also going to turn on. I want to see your bright, shining faces. Okay, so it says here. This is the first question, which is from Cyrus. Did you do daily? Oh, you already answered that sort of. Did you do daily edits to make sure you hoped what you did? You were taking a quick look to make sure there was nothing wrong, but no in-depth edit until you got back.
Yeah, of course I checked everything. I checked my what I shot to make sure I got it because there was time for me to go back if I needed to. At the end, we kept a day in case anything needed to be reshot. Although on the last day, I have to say it absolutely poured, so there was no getting that. I absolutely checked every night to make sure I had the pictures. And of course, I'm looking at my lighting on the back of the camera, which is inadequate, but it worked.
That is, it sounds incredibly stressful.
It was stressful. Yeah.
Yeah, I just take selfies now mostly. It's just alleviates all these assignments, you know.
Yeah, we know you
I'm
do.
my favorite subject.
We
So
know that.
Mai's asking, because she came onto the call late, how did the Japan assignment come to be? How did you get that assignment? And which is a great story because you did mention it about you're the one who basically told them to do it, which I think is hilarious.
Yeah. How I got it was we did the workshop last September. At the end of the workshop, as some of you who are on the call know, I hired a guy to take us to a more remote region. So he is a Japanese American guy who runs a company. He's also a photographer, but now he does not photograph anymore. So he's very open to photography, loves photographers. He said, I'd like to bring you back over to meet the government people, to see this region. So he brought me back over in January of this year. So I saw the region, and after the government people took me and a couple of other people around, at the end of that, they said, now you've seen it, we've brought you here. How can we bring people to this place? And then I said, this is how you do it. Tell stories, show what it looks like. And then they said, great idea, Elena. We're going to hire you to come back. So that's how that happened.
Why didn't we think of this 30 years ago?
Right. And then
Hey,
I'll say one thing. I then put together a pretty elaborate PDF of all my work. Not all my work, work that was appropriate for them, and sent it to them as kind of an insurance, like, this is what I can do for you. So that's what they had to go on. Also, it wasn't just me saying, yeah, I can do that. I think you should do it. I put together appropriate work in an appropriate manner that they shared and kept. And based on that, they hired me. We lost your
that
voice. Yeah,
that's
okay.
even better because then you can stack it with images that you know you want to make. It's not
Yes,
like you're putting in some corporate thing that you don't want to do. You're saying, "Hey, I can shoot these kind of landscapes." So you could
yes.
conceivably be using your quarry work And
For
then
landscapes, I did.
yeah, and your portrait work that whatever, because last time I was with you shooting portraits was you were shooting a Hasselblad and Portra. So this goes back like probably,
Right.
15 years ago. But
Yeah.
that's such a super smart thing to do, is to stack the deck in your favor with the kind of work that you want. So the next question is, were there cultural elements you needed to be aware of and spend the time learning about before you left? And were there ones that you were surprised by when you got there,
Good
other than the
question.
fact that the monk was mean?
Good questions. I already knew the monk was going to be mean. I think I've had some experience with monks before. Um, yes, Japan is a really, really formal environment. And so I had to be very respectful. It's hot, Japan is another ballgame. It's really the way you interact with people, what's expected of me to them. It's not casual. But what was really so, of course, I had to have cards made. I haven't had cards in a long time. Everybody exchanges cards. Everybody wants to know who you are, so you exchange cards. That's kind of levels the playing field. Um, it's just a way you move. It's like not a casual society. But I'll tell you one important thing. We had a translator who was an official kind of government translator. And then I had my assistant who was much more casual. And I was photographing the boatman, the guy who rows this big long boat down this beautiful gorge. And I was photographing him while he was driving, I'm below him and photographing him, the gorges behind him. It was quite nice. He's being lit. Um, and then I wanted to do an interview. So we stopped the boat at the end and started talking to him. And the government translator was translating the questions in a really formal way that I wasn't getting a sense of him. And then the assistant slash translator jumped in and said, I got to stop you. This is what this guy is actually saying. He's saying, I didn't have a job. Can I be honest? I really needed a job. So it changed the whole dynamic. Like I got a totally different sense of him through the different translations. She was telling me something that was so formal and straight. I couldn't get a sense of him. And that informs how you photograph somebody also. What if I could talk to somebody, I would have a whole different idea of how to approach them potentially. When the second translator told me that he was a super casual guy and was speaking in a way I'm speaking now, it kind of broke the ice that had been there. So I hope that answers the question. You have to be really intuitive when you're photographing. Where am I? Is my body language right? Am I interacting with people correctly? Is this right for the situation? Those kinds of things.
I think you lucked out because having Derek as the second translator, and to your point, kind of if the government folks wander off and the official translator wanders off, you still have him, and he's coming in at a very more low profile level. That seems like
Right.
the ultimate scenario of having both of those. So the government official comes and makes it official, and then Derek is like your ace in the hole, where it's like, man, if I need to kind of get this person to relax in a different angle, he's coming from more of the peer-to-peer level than someone from the government.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
I mispronounced her. It's me, not my. So,
It's May.
I figured I would eventually get to that. And yes, Steve figured out that Elena is broadcasting from my living room. So yes, we're both in the same house. So this is from Sam. I'd love to know how you scout for paid assignments. Do you have anyone, e.g., an agency that promotes you, or you are doing all the research and outreach? And I have an answer for this as well. So,
You go
so
ahead.
do you want me to read it again?
Yeah, but you answer it too. Yeah.
I'd love to know how you scout for paid assignments. Oh, so I was thinking about something else. So I was thinking about actual location scouting, which I used to do in LA for other photographers when I first moved to California. He's asking, basically what Sam's asking is, how are you going about trying to find assignments like this? Do you have an agency that's promoting you, or do you doing all the research and outreach on your own?
In a long career, I've had all of the above. So representation on different coasts or in different countries. So um, now this one. It goes both ways. It really goes both ways. Sometimes it comes from someone else, sometimes it's from me. And it's the same in the fine art world. Sometimes a gallery sells a work, sometimes it's me or finds a collector. So it's really both.
And for me, I had an agent, but it was a syndication agent. So they didn't do anything to help me find work. They just took existing work that I'd already photographed and syndicated it globally for resales. And this was before stock absolutely died. And it was a horrible death. And the agency I was with was the last agency that did not sell out to Corbis or Getty. And the CEO wrote us all a letter and said, "This is a train wreck. It's slow motion. It's going to take a couple of years, but we are not selling, and that means we are all going to die a horrible death." And that's exactly what happened. And there were all kinds of lawsuits and everything else. But I basically had to look and find work on my own the whole time, but the only exception to that was when I was in the newspaper world where I'd show up in the morning and there were assignments. But the second I left the newspaper from that time, so 95 to 2010, everything was me going and scrounging for it. So, yeah.
Now I think it's all of the above. It's really all of the above. And I will say something about the licensing to this job in Japan, which was I granted them all licensing. So I did not put restrictions on them. Sometimes you'll say you can do this one time in your contract, one time. My license, I'm coming over to I'm photographing these 10 people from these dates to these dates, and you have the ability to use it once for an exhibition. I didn't do that for them. I really allowed all licensing and was encouraging that. It was just sort of my desire to see them flourish and not put a restriction on them. That also means that I can use those pictures for whatever I want. So it goes both ways.
Yeah, I had a question last week from an actual working photographer who wrote me and said, "You keep talking about this licensing thing. I don't know what it is." And I was kind of like, ooh, surprised. But like if anyone doesn't know, licensing an image means you're asking me for an image, and it's based on where you want to use it, for how long, and in what exclusivity. There's other parameters as well, but those are kind of the big three. So you want to use it in the U.S. or globally, or some other region? Do you want how long? Is it for a week? Is it for a month? Is it for in perpetuity? And then how exclusive? Do you want total exclusive access to the image, or is it okay if other people use it? And then that's how the fee is based on licensing. And it's
Right.
really how commercial and advertising photographers and a lot of other folks utilized and made their living for a
Yeah.
long, long time. And it's the rise of the influencer community has sort of decimated the licensing field because a lot of influencers don't know what they're leaving on the table. And just to give you an example, I know someone who recently lost a $90,000 job approximately to someone who came in and bid, a $1,500 or some crazy thing like that. So it's a good thing to know about and to understand whether or not you're doing it at all. But okay, so moving on here, we got about 15 minutes left. We got a bunch more questions. Rudy checking in from South America, of course, because every call is better with a Brazilian
Yes.
involved. Rudy's asking about what about the multiple exposure experiences for both of us? Because I know I think you were shooting multis long before I was, because I think a lot of your quarry stuff was multis, and then my multi exposure began the first trip to Albania before I left, when I thought it would be interesting to try to make something about old versus new Albania in a single image, and that's sort of. But I'll let you talk about your multiple, because are you still doing them, or did they end with that project?
So my multiples were not shot in camera. Sometimes they are on a workshop just because it's easier there. But if I'm doing my own work, I'm actually stitching together hundreds of pictures. So they're manual. Yeah, it's a cheap reproduction to do the multiples, even though I love them, but mine were really laborious. And I have to say the film is an extension of that work. So the film that I just did, the triptych, in a way, is kind of marrying pictures. So we're looking at how visuals are working together. It's the same as if you're making a book. How are the visuals working together? What story am I trying to tell? So my multiples that were hand done or then brought to the computer and done through Photoshop and extensive editing then became the same thing kind of for the film. So I collaged in the film. I'd like to get back to doing it. It just depends how much time I really feel like investing sitting in front of a computer screen because it's a lot. And I go through phases where I want to make things, where journaling comes in, or cutting things up, or doing collage or physical work, making prints, or getting back on the computer. It's kind of as much as my body can physically take. So I just see where I'm at, if that makes sense. That answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. It's
Yeah.
I haven't really Blurb asked me to write something a few months ago, not even a few months ago, a few weeks ago. I wrote this post. They said, "Do you have any art to go with it?" And I was looking around and I'm just randomly looking for something. And I found all the multis I did in Peru and I was like, "Oh, I think one of these will probably work." So I sent a couple options and we had a contractor working for us at the time who's really good, super smart, getting his PhD in Greece. He lives between Canada and Greece, and he worked at a lens culture in Paris for a long time. And he took our blog and really elevated it from what it was before. And he saw those pictures and he wrote me and said, "Holy cow, like what are these? Where did you get those?" And I said, "Oh, these are from, Peru multi-exposures." He said, "These are really beautiful." So I like it when I'm doing them. I don't really do them much anymore. It depends also too camera specific. The Fuji cameras are really good for multis, and I
Yeah.
love the little X100 because it's not my favorite camera, but shooting multis through it makes it more than a camera than it really is, in my opinion. And the way that Fuji has it set up, it works really well. But I'm about to do a live event for Blurb tomorrow, and it's about portraiture, and someone submitted collage portraits. And when I first saw them, the first one is hilarious. And I thought, this is probably not something I'm going to review. But then the more I looked at them, I was like, these are really cool. And so half of the image is photograph and half of the image is prop. And then they're rephotographed. And there's a couple of them that are so good. And I thought, man, like physical collage to me is probably the next place that I'm going to go. Instead of in-camera multis, I'm going to shoot photographs and then I'm going to make collage sort of multiple exposures from there. But of course, when do I have time to do that? Never. Right. So let's see here. What is next? All right, this is a long one. Elena, this is from Cyrus. Elena, you've shot both documentary and conceptual photography for a project like this. Did you skew more one way or the other? I ask because you said it was going to be part of an exhibition, and I've found most exhibitions tend to look for more conceptual work as they tend to sell better. Just my understanding, so I don't want to generalize. Then again, this project was probably a little different. So did you skew doc or conceptual?
Doc, for sure. I skewed editorial. So for those of you, I don't know if that's a term that's anyway, I skewed magazine. So, but I thought that having their stories somehow. So then we'll take it further. I haven't done this yet with the group in Japan, but we are planning on doing this. So taking some of what the artisans or the people I was photographing said from the interviews and highlighting some of their words potentially across the photographs, potentially, maybe, we're not sure yet. Or I don't necessarily want the text next to, I will have some say in how the exhibition goes, which I'm really happy to help them with. But I don't know yet if we're going to do it sort of magazine style with a few words or text to draw people in, or if it's going to be below, or if we're going to do kind of wallpaper for some of the landscapes and then put the portraits on top, which could be cool. So I skewed no, this was a job and and they needed something from me, which was to get across who the people are of the region and what the region actually looks like. So that was my job to really make sure the interviewing was an extra idea just to be able to pull people in more to who they're looking at and what they do, and also why the region is important in what they do. So we're still working that out, but I skewed more editorial, which is slightly more doc. Does that make sense? If you were opening up a magazine and you saw a cool portrait story, a story that featured a big portrait, you're opening the New Yorker or the New York Times Magazine or something like that. That was my impetus.
Okay, a couple of quick answer questions, and then we're gonna take the last couple of minutes where everybody can turn their mic on and we can just, everybody can say hello. But the
Great.
next couple of questions are relatively quick because we've got about four
Yeah.
minutes. Um, which is, hang on a second, let me go back here. Is your film going to be made available online at some point, or is it available now?
It's not yet. So it's still doing the festival run, and then we're still, so it's not yet. And it's because it's a triptych, I made it incredibly difficult to be seen anywhere other than in a big theater or a
Yeah.
museum environment. So I don't know that it will stream. I really hope so. So it's still kind of in the early phases of seeing where it will land. Once it does, my hope in a museum on three walls as a really immersive experience. That's how it was built. That's what it was conceived to be. The festival one screen viewing was an afterthought, which I'm happy about too. But I don't know yet, but I'll make it clear when it is.
I'm curious about this as well because when I knew you before, you were a Canon digital shooter, but then I've also seen you using a Fuji camera. Was there a consistency to your lens choice across the portraits?
In this, for the Japan jobs,
Simon.
consistency. Yeah, I mostly, what did I shoot? I actually shot my Canon 1DS
Okay.
and with a 135, but then I was also going wide. So I did have a zoom and then a fixed 135. Yeah.
Okay. Um, I'm curious about this as well. You captured audio from the people. Were you capturing audio from the people you were photographing, or did you do that separately?
Separately. So I had a small Zoom recorder, the F2, I think it's called, and
Hmm.
it's great. And so it
H2.
connects, yes, connects to my phone. After we shot, we went in another environment. We did the interviews for 15 or 20 or 30 minutes, however long the people had. And then I, of course, downloaded all of those, and then they'll be transcribed by someone in Japan.
Jesus, that's so complicated. Just doing anything in addition to making pictures is a nightmare. So I'm tipping my hat to you because that is I have to do this all the time too. It's like, hey, can you shoot motion, wide angle motion, long lens motion, 1:1,
Right.
16 by 9, 9 by 16, and then shoot some stills and do some writing and record some sound. And you're like, it's a fire drill all the time. So
Yeah.
anytime anyone can successfully do any of that, I'm amazed. One of the things that Steve, this is not a question, made a comment that I enjoyed hearing about what was planned and what was fluid and organic. And I think, I don't know what your experience is, but one of the things that I tried never to do that much of when I was doing assignments was preconceive what was going to happen or what I was going to see because it never seemed to fit. And then I kept kind of throwing myself off because mentally I'd be like, oh, this doesn't look like what I thought it was, instead of just saying, these are the ingredients, this is where I have to work.
I mean, before I went, I needed to know who was I shooting and what was the timing of those people. So they sent me a full schedule, like
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, and then you go there. So I felt the need to know who they were. And so, yeah, I couldn't know more than that. I mean, basically, you walk into a scene, I walk into a scene, I look around, where can I do this? What's interesting? Who's the person? What do they look like? Okay, could they fit here? What's the lighting? You have to fire pretty quickly. Like,
Yeah.
okay, they're here. So I need two locations. I don't need just one because I need a second scene or a second shot, but in case, so I'm covered. So you have to, they're kind of, you have to be firing a lot and just think, how do I make this scene interesting? What about this room is interesting? Or can I take somebody out here? Can I do something slightly different that I haven't done before?
I think for me, it's compartmentalizing your brain because you're balancing the assistant, the client, the person you're photographing, and your needs or what you're looking for. So
Yeah.
you could literally be in conversation with the client, and 50% of your brain is compartmentalized and it's handling that. But the other 50% is looking for places where you can photograph and like covering these other bases. And then the more complicated, the more compartmentalizing of your brain you have to do. And I think that takes practice and also takes, once you get experience through that. But everyone can.
One thing I want to just say quickly, really quickly, because this is important what you said reminded me of. It's really important to get a shot that I got a shot that I wanted, not what I necessarily thought they wanted. It had to be both. Like I had to be happy with it. For example, Derek, who was assisting me, at one point said, "Oh, you could get the sake brewer holding a bottle." And I thought, never in my life would I photograph a person holding their product. And I said out loud, never would I do that. Like, that's you, that's not me. And so you have to really stick to your style and say, like, no, I'm not going to do that. There's another way I can do that that will still get it across for them, but it's my style. Anyway, that's critical when you're shooting.
Of course, shooting
Yeah, it's
you
your
have to
own.
cover your own bases because
Yeah,
most of
yeah,
the time your bases are probably going to be more creative than the client
yeah.
who's thinking they have a lot of parameters and restrictions on them and they're not expecting
Right,
what's rattling around in your melon.
right.
So everyone can turn your mics on here if you want to just say howdy. We're at the end of our little soiree here. That was fun, and I learned a
Yeah,
ton of stuff about. I haven't done an assignment for so long. I was kind of simultaneously jealous and terrified at the same time.
yeah. It was terrifying. Hi, thanks for joining us. We're really happy. We hope we can do
Yeah,
this a little bit more frequently going forward.
nice.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's nice to see everybody. I know a few of you have, of course, come with us and are coming with us to Morocco. Um, yeah, we're going to hit Japan again next spring. Try to go to some of the lesser known places, and then, of course, go to the more beautiful places. So thanks for showing up. We appreciate it.
Yeah, and if you have any further questions or whatever,
Yeah.
just reach out to either one of us. We can get through it. We'll respond.
I just want to say I like this format. This is cool watching two kind of subject matter experts, but then also talking about things that are pushing you out of your comfort zone, which is kind of cool. Which is I think we're all at different levels, but still out of our zone at some point. So it's a super kind of format to watch.
Thanks. Yeah, we hope it
Good.
was. Yeah, yeah. We thought we hoped it would be interesting for you and give some, valuable info. So, yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I think I've got a couple ideas of what we can talk about next, and I have a project idea that I'm thinking about starting when I get back to New Mexico in the fall. That might be kind of fun. It's something very outside of what I would normally ever do. And that's partly because of my job restrictions, but also too because photography's changing, I'm changing, and I'm looking to try things that I haven't done before. So it's kind of a project about a geographical location and sort of everything that happens inside that location, which could be kind of fun to talk about how project ideas come to be and the research that I would need to do, and then through the principal photography and all that. So we could
Yeah.
we could drum up another one of these.
Yeah, we're gonna maybe try to do one in early September, maybe every couple months. So we hope to see you there. Good seeing everyone. Thanks so much.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Great seeing your
Bye.
That
faces.
was
Great.
great.
Hi,
Thank you.
great to see you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Yeah, we'll see
See
you next time.
you.
All right, bye.
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 So, end.